Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and DC Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Welcome, everyone. I am delighted to have in our studio today Bob Cohn, who is the CEO of, locally, you know him as the CEO of the Banner, but sort of the stealth one is he's also the CEO of the Venetoulis Institute for Local Journalism. So welcome to the program, Bob.
Rebecca, thanks for having me.
Well, and you are very welcome, and I appreciate that you've made the time to come and talk to me because you're now, 6 weeks into sort of the major news. I mean, you've had a lot of major news events with the Pulitzer finalists this year and all those good things. But most recently, the Venetoulis Institute purchased the assets of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And so you took ownership of those assets, not all the contracts and all the drama, but the actual operation, May 4th. And so we're recording this right before July 4th. So I wanted to check in with you and see, how it relates, how it's going in Pittsburgh, how it relates to the work of the Banner, which has also expanded quite a bit. So we've got lots to talk about.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So how are things going? When you purchase a new operation or an asset, there's a lot of learning that happens. And so what are you finding out? Was it what you expected when you guys jumped into that pool?
Yeah, well, it all happened very quickly.
Right.
The owners of the Post Gazette announced in January that they were going to shut down the newspaper after 240 years. The leading news organization in Western Pennsylvania and 240 years old. So we kind of expressed interest later that month, and it moved very quickly when we ended up signing an agreement in April. So very fast, and then took over on May 4th. So what we expected is hard to know. We didn't have time to expect anything.
Right.
But it is an excellent brand. It's got a lot of history and brand equity in Pittsburgh and the surrounding areas. It's won Pulitzer Prizes and done excellent work. And, we're coming in to learn about Pennsylvania, to learn about that market, to bring what we've learned in Maryland there, and then see if we can kind of operate both properties now, both the Banner and the Post Gazette, under this joint ownership, and grow them both so they can be important sources of trusted local news in their communities.
Right. And so actually, I guess, let's take a step back and sort of talk about how this acquisition fits into like the overall umbrella and idea of what the Venetoulis Institute for local journalism. I think that's an important piece, what
Yeah.
they're trying to do. And so tell us a little bit about the overarching plan.
Well, the mission at Venetoulis is really two parts. The first is to bring quality, trusted journalism to communities that need it most, and help people navigate their lives and hold their powerful officials accountable and institutions accountable. But the second is really to be addressing the crisis in local news that's as we see nationwide, with so many newspapers shutting down or being purchased by hedge funds that are kind of hollowing them out, or disinvesting in the future of local news, and to do our small part to try to counteract what we see there. And really, that was an experiment that we began here in Maryland, starting in Baltimore City and then the counties surrounding Baltimore. And as we grew elsewhere in Maryland, and we can talk about the Maryland growth,
Mhm.
all along from the very beginning, Stuart Bainham, who founded the Banner in 2022, always said from the beginning that we would try to create a model that we believed could work nationwide, and then to bring it elsewhere if the occasion arose.
Well, and I feel like the pace of expansion and growth for the banner, I mean, we'll talk about Maryland, I guess a little bit more in depth, but in it doesn't feel like, a 4-year-old company is like, "Yes, let's go and and acquire other properties in other states." So, when you were, sort of on the brink of doing that, and there were other offers for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, what made you all feel like you were the right purchaser at the right time?
Yeah. Well, first I want to double click on what you said. Last week we celebrated our fourth anniversary, so we are a startup uh,
Mhm.
here in Maryland. Um, but uh, what made us think that we we could do something helpful in Pittsburgh was the fact that our model, which is this, we can talk about it, but this mix of subscriptions and advertising and philanthropy, combined with uh, some cost discipline and just absolute commitment to the community, that could work elsewhere and not just in Maryland. And that was always the goal from the beginning. And Pittsburgh, it wasn't so much that we looked around and said we have to go to Pittsburgh, but
Mhm.
Pittsburgh presented itself as an opportunity at a time when we were thinking, uh, there's some evidence that our model is going to be working in Maryland, and we should, consistent with the founder's note that Stewart wrote back in June of 2022, we should be thinking about where else we might take it for the good of trying to spread the word on local journalism.
Yeah. No, and that makes perfect sense. I mean, if you have a business model that you're, and granted, I think the jury's still out on, like, there's not a silver bullet of revenue models for news media at this point. So it's really very freestyle, and you're drawing from a lot of different aspects. Um, and when you look at the Pittsburgh property, I mean, fundamentally, they ran into the issues with healthcare costs and some of the costs associated with the union suit that was resolved in 2025. And so when you look at that organization, I mean, they had the Pulitzer for the Squirrel Hill Tree of Life shooting. They have, I mean, Pittsburgh is a really interesting city in terms of, like, sense of place and locale and a lot of dedication to their
Yeah,
local news outlets, and the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette is kind of, there's other news media, as there always is, but they're definitely they are the paper of record with a long career, so, like, history. So when you, kind of look at it, it makes sense to me, and obviously it made sense to you guys as well to do it, but that had a lot of really good fundamentals to be the next acquisition because you didn't inherit the debts, you only took the assets.
right, right.
So it's kind of clean slate at that point.
Yeah,
Am I getting
and
that
you're
right?
right. They've been through some pain in recent years, but that doesn't tarnish the overall strength of the brand, its place in the community. I've learned just in the 2 months that we've owned it, and in the month or two running up to it, just how strongly the brand resonates, how much belief people have in it. They stuck with it even during difficult strike years, and then about 90 days where the message was they're shutting down
Mhm,
between their message on January 7th and the announcement on April 16th that we would purchase was a period where it was known that they were shutting down. And that was a hard time. And so the asset purchase allows us to start from scratch with the strength of the brand and the customer base, the advertising base, and the subscriber base, but to kind of right size things
mhm.
and get a fresh start at the same time.
Yeah, and so, I think it's such a juxtaposition that you have this really new startup, digital only, and then you have you know, predating the Constitution kind
Yeah.
of publication that's still in print, doing like, really long past. And you've been in the newspaper industry or the news media industry for a long time. So what are you like, how are you handling that juxtaposition? Or is it really just format and wrapping? Or are there fundamental differences when you're coming from those 2 cultures because it's a startup culture and an entrenched culture. Like,
Yeah.
how's that working in your head?
Well, I mean, for starters, the Banner is not a print operation. So
Right.
the Post Gazette, print is an important part. They have the newspaper comes out twice a week, and it's an important part of the identity of the Post Gazette. It's a driver of readership, and it's a driver of revenue. So all of us at the Banner have worked in print, or nearly all of us. I suspect maybe some of the very younger ones have not. Um, so we have print in our blood, but the Banner is not doesn't have a print cadence. So absorbing that into the culture is new, and it's familiar to many of us,
Mhm.
but it's still new for Venetoulis to have a print operation. Uh, and we all talk about, we're startup and legacy. The Banner quickly becomes legacy too. If the legacy happens, there's so much new to learn, and things are changing so much that the fact that the Post Gazette's been around for 240 years and the Banner for 4 doesn't really make the Banner any more immune to having to learn new things than the Post
Mhm.
Gazette is, because the world's changing so quickly, and so profoundly all the time. Uh, there are some differences.
So tell me more about those differences. Like, how are you working through them? Because I do love that, sort of that idea of continuous revelation. Everything is changing. Like this time last year, we weren't really dealing with AI as
Right.
deeply as we are now. And that, cuts across all sorts of things. Um, but when you're like that difference and diversity of thought is also really powerful. So, like, I'm sure that the Banner is teaching the Pittsburgh Post Gazette things, but like, how do those differences then come back and inform what you're doing here locally?
Yeah, in both
Or
cases,
do
we're
they?
learning. Yeah, they're I mean, it's only been 2 months, but we can already see ways in which, Pittsburgh is doing different things and new things and better ways of doing things than the Banner is, and vice versa. So we think we have a pretty strong, subscription model, that we
Mhm,
can help, goose subscriptions in Pittsburgh. They have a very strong advertising, function, and we can learn from some of what they're doing there. We have a strong social video component at the Banner, and bringing some of that social energy to the Post Gazette is going to be helpful. And the Post Gazette is so deeply embedded in the community that's we can look at those roots and figure out how we can better plant down the roots for the Banner in Maryland.
mhm. That makes sense. And I just want a point of clarification, really, um, just so that I'm set on this. Those are all kind of back office or I guess operational functions as opposed to editorial functions. And so I
Right.
just want to clarify those newsrooms are not merged, like you still have the Pittsburgh Post Gazette editor and editorial staff and Audrey and her team at the Banner. And so I just could you clarify for everyone so that we're not misleading anyone about like how they're interacting?
Totally. Yeah, it's a great question. So the Venetoulis Institute operates both properties, and uh, areas that are kind of geographic specific and driven, like the newsroom or the advertising function or the events teams, those are very much separate.
Mhm,
So there's a separate editor in both locations, and there's a separate advertising leader, and anything that is unique to location, we're doing as separate operations. There are a lot of back office operations, as you indicate, whether it's finance or product or engineering or HR or some growth marketing, where you can centralize that and build a much stronger central service. And that's what we're trying to do. It helps us absorb fixed costs so
mhm,
that we can drive both properties to sustainability more quickly, get both to profitability. And then because we're a 501(c)(3), the minute we can make a dollar, it all goes back into the journalism. So, very specific geography based um, entities like the newsroom in particular and advertising, and then some that would kind of roll up to central services.
Now, you all have the Banner has some really cool events. I'm just thinking of Innovate Her. You've done sort of your Maryland legislative look, your Impact Maryland things. Are there like what events are you excited about maybe learning from Pittsburgh about? Are there ways that you think you can bring them back and forth?
Yeah, they have a really, kind of active, um, they have something called Best Bites, which is an
Hmm.
active food event or series of
Oh,
food
cool.
events that we've talked a lot about doing at the Banner and just haven't done it, and so we think we can learn a
Mhm,
lot from that and try to do some of those around Maryland. Um, and, I think that some of our events like Impact Maryland, the kind of the, the kind of more, um, TED style events,
mhm,
could work well in Pittsburgh. So there's some opportunity for a lot of best practice, back and forth trading, that we see benefits, for
mhm.
both properties.
Yeah. And so actually going back to some of your shared services, and it's premature, but are you thinking that, you'll have like maybe circulation marketing in one place, or like are you whenever in the industry or any industry, people talk about, well, we're going to share services. There's that immediate frisson of fear. Like, is that going to be centralized in my town or is it going to be centralized over there? Or are you thinking less of like geographic locations and more like people doing the work that happen to be wherever they are? Does that make sense?
A little more of the latter. It's not, I mean, I think, kind of post-COVID, we live in a more fluid world
Hmm.
about geography. So, we a lot of um, the leadership of the Banner, um, some of those folks in the C-suite will move over to operating, their function across both properties, except, of course, advertising and events and
Hmm.
especially the newsroom. Uh, but they have teams in both locations.
Mhm. Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, Pittsburgh is only 4 hours away. It's not like it's San Francisco, and I mean, I guess you have to get over the Steelers thing, but you already are dealing with that with the Commanders when you go into
Yeah.
Montgomery and Prince George's County. So
Well, we're just about to. We haven't had a commander season. Um, we did a little bit of overlap when we went into Montgomery, but we weren't really covering the Commanders then. We are now covering DC sports, which we can talk about in our
mhm.
expansion down there. So suddenly we have, three NFL teams, two of which are sworn, rivals.
Is that gonna rip the organization apart?
Kind of went into Pittsburgh making jokes about it and realized it was really no laughing matter to Steelers fans.
Oh, yeah.
So, I'll have to be a little more careful.
Yes. Always watch your back, I suppose. Well, so I wanted to ask, when you guys went into Montgomery County and Prince George's, you did so much research. I remember talking to Zuri about sort of the lead up to that, the expansion and uh, then the bureau. And so I wanted to understand kind of that philosophy of how you get to know a new space before you go in there. And how you can kind of apply those lessons to this new space also in a new to you space in Pittsburgh. Like, I just think it's masterful the way the kind of the listening sessions that you did that weren't necessarily related to here's news media readers, but more learning about the community. So could you talk to us a little bit about how you
Yeah.
do that and why you did it in that way?
Right. So we did that in Montgomery before we launched last September. We're in the middle of doing that right now with Prince George's. We only launched there in May, so 2 months ago,
Mhm.
and we're about. I think we've done about 4 or 5 listening sessions across Prince George's County in the last, few weeks and going into the summer. And we did a little bit of, quantitative, research,
Mm.
and a little bit of qualitative along with that. And now the listening sessions. To really make sure we understood, what members of the community want and need from local media. The big difference in Pittsburgh is, we have 100 people who work in Pittsburgh as part of Venetoulis right now. So we are not going in fresh. A few of us are going in fresh, but we have a team that is extremely, well integrated and wise about the market there. It's the difference really between uh, the Banner moving to a new region and Venetoulis purchasing another asset. And we did. The previous owner did terminate all employees, and then we hired from scratch,
Mhm.
'cause that's what an asset purchase is. But in hiring from scratch, we availed ourselves of the tremendous talent from what at that moment was about to be the old Post-Gazette.
Mhm.
And there was a fantastic talent pool. So, the challenge of learning the community is, much lower, because our leaders on the ground there know the community very, very well.
Yeah. So, I'm curious, I believe that, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette had about 100 staffers or 100 newsroom staffers. How many of them came over into the new organization?
Yeah, we invited all members of the newsroom to, raise their hand and indicate interest in coming over, to the new Post-Gazette, and about 90, not about 90, exactly 90
Mhm.
indicated interest, and we hired 59 of them, so, 2/3, came over, and, all of them everyone we made an offer to accepted, and, it would have been nice to, uh, have more like 80 or 90 or even have 100 people in the newsroom. The truth is that the Post Gazette has been losing money for a long, long time, and our goal is to stabilize the operation financially and then grow it, once we can turn it around a little bit, which is consistent with the way we did what we did in Baltimore. We started the Banner with 35 people in the newsroom, and now, just finishing our 4th year, we have 100 people in the newsroom. So
Mhm.
we we will build out the Post Gazette, but we needed to uh, uh, get to a place where we could align the size of the newsroom with the financial realities of the organization.
Oh, 100%. You gotta put your own oxygen mask on before you can scale up and breathe. So, that fif those 59, head count, that's the space that you wanna be in now. It's not like you had 59, but you wanna be at 70 by September or something like that.
Yeah, we're
Am I
not
getting that right?
growing instantly, but I'll be surprised if we don't grow you know I don't anticipate a lot of growth in this calendar year, put it
Got it.
that way. So we're not
Okay, so you
we're not
have
at
what you
60
need.
getting to 70. We're at this number, while we get our sea legs and while we, recover from the shutdown. I mean, they lost some advertising
Mhm.
revenue. We lost some advertising revenue, as part of the expectation that things were shutting down. So all that will bounce back and is already showing a very, very positive momentum. And then we will, look for growth.
Yeah. No, and that makes sense. I just wasn't sure if, you were at your desire right now. Um, and so I wanted to when we talk about the Venetoulis Institute and this permeates through the banner as well, like the values that you really bring to the organization, and where you think your model is, you focus your model is talent, infrastructure, and then culture. And so we talked a little bit about infrastructure. You've right sized for what you need. You have the assets. You took the talent that was appropriate, but talk to me about culture because right now I sort of feel like you have all these different pieces and all these essentially like new entities that you're trying to, and culture is such a difficult thing to translate and to make permeate a workplace. So how are you, tell me more about the culture that you want to have, that you've really tried to institute at the Banner, how you're bringing that into Montgomery and Prince George's and DC sports while we're at it. And then you're also trying to, make that happen in Pittsburgh. So how do you do all that?
Well, first, you're right that culture is critical. We believe it's, among the most important components of what's working at the Banner. and by that I include Montgomery and Prince George's and everywhere we've gone in the state. And we are very much committed to bringing that culture to Pittsburgh, some of which is already in place. And we talk about it a lot. We talk about it at town halls. We talk about it in one-on-ones with leaders. It's on the wall. It's painted on the wall of the Banner headquarters. Um, Although we're doing a little work in that space now, so we had to pull some things down. But partly because we're expanding a little bit in in um, in Baltimore as well. Did I say Pittsburgh and Baltimore as well? Uh, but, whether it's collaboration, urgency, respect, commitment to the community, uh, these are, you know, d data-driven or data-informed decision making. These are all part of the culture, and, uh the mutual respect and the working together, uh, and the breaking down of walls and silos is critical to what's worked for the Banner in Baltimore, and now elsewhere in Maryland, and that's an important part of what we would bring to Pittsburgh in our.
Mhm. And so, like, how are you on a really tactical level, how are you translating that into an organization that's had some, like, recent trauma? Because not only you have the fear around the sale, because there was probably a good, 90 days. There was a period where nobody knew what was happening, so that's destabilizing and scary. And then you had the drama and trauma of the union fight and the lawsuit. So, like, what are they and then you have bright and sunny, earnest people from Baltimore coming in and being like, "We want rainbows and kittens with urgency and transparency and respect." How are you translating that in? Because like, that's a hard thing to do, I think.
Yeah, but a lot of those traumatic moments that you're talking about are in the past. They happened. The strike ended 8 months ago,
Mhm,
and the fear of the shutdown. I mean, that obviously was extremely traumatic. uh, But the minute we announced we're coming in, fear of shutdown evaporates because we're now not shutting down. And as for the positive values that we believe in and are trying to inculcate, there's two ways to do it. I think one is to stand up and talk about them, and the
mhm,
other is to model them every day, just to do them. Part of the cultural values is just this is how we operate. Now let's start working together, and just let that kind of come through osmosis and through demonstration of how we all work together.
mhm. So, like, that consistency and just sort of walking your talk
Yeah,
is how you've been doing that.
absolutely.
And then as you're building up, new newsrooms, and I guess Prince George's is now, like, your newest newsroom that you're building up, are a lot of that I would imagine you're bringing in the right people, the right talent to sort of do what you want, but, tell us a little bit about what you're seeing as you build out new newsrooms.
Well, what we're seeing so when we launched in 2022, uh, it was the Baltimore Banner to serve Baltimore, and very quickly within the first year, the surrounding counties around Baltimore, so Anne Arundel and Howard and Baltimore County. But if you look at the founder's note that Stewart wrote at the time we launched, even before we launched, uh, there were two parts. There was to be to serve the people of Maryland, so to get beyond Baltimore, but also, this is from the note, to build a sustainable business model for local news that can be replicated in communities across all 50 states. So even then, this little punk of a startup was talking about something much more grand or grandiose. So when it came to sticking within Maryland, uh, a year ago, really before the Washington Post was going through its most recent and more convulsive troubles.
Mhm,
Uh, we looked at Montgomery County, the largest county in the state, most populous county in the state, the wealthiest county in the state, and a complete news desert, really, or nearly complete. When we went in to do our market research there was a hunger for for trusted local news,
Mhm,
or more of it, at least. I won't say there was none, but more of it. Uh, so, and so we went in and uh, we hired six reporters and brought an experienced editor from the Baltimore operation down to run it, and brought in a couple people to do ad sales. I will say that since we launched last September and now in the early summer, uh, more than half of our net growth in subscriptions in those 8 or 9 months has been from Montgomery County.
mhm,
It's been a bet that has really paid off. The In our voter guide, the number one driver of reader interest, as demonstrated by page views and subscriber starts, was Montgomery County over Baltimore City and Baltimore County. Uh,
mhm,
and Prince George's was very close behind.
yeah,
So betting that the banner could expand into neighboring counties, even if those counties were DC facing and not
mhm,
Baltimore facing, was a bit of a gamble that seems to be paying off. And really, we wouldn't have done Prince George's if we hadn't seen the evidence of Montgomery working. And we jumped into Prince George's a little sooner than we might have, but, the Post announced, back in February that they were
right,
cutting 40% of the newsroom, and that announcement coupled with the, um, early signs of progress in Montgomery County gave us the confidence to put some, reporter boots on the ground in Prince George's and to start covering, DC sports teams, the
right,
Commanders, the Nationals, the Capitals, not so much to serve Washington readers, although we're happy if they want to read, but to serve our Maryland audience.
mhm,
2.1 million of people who live in Prince George's and Montgomery and are much more likely to be Commanders and Nationals fans than they are Ravens and Orioles fans.
right, right. So, I mean, in we talked a little bit about infrastructure and you're still a startup. You're getting to be a legacy startup, don't get me wrong. There's things you're learning and changing, but it strikes me that you have been really strategic and smart about seeing an opportunity and then jumping on it. But that also, I mean, you don't have a huge influx of people back there saying, "Oh, yeah, I've got time on my hands, find me another property to run." So, like, how do you balance that, sort of still being a lean infrastructure with all these places you're trying to go and making sure the mission is succeeding? Because that feels like dancing on the head of a pin to me, but
Well, I
you're
think
doing
that
it.
in hindsight, I don't think we had any intention of doing the the DC counties, the DC facing counties in Maryland, and another operation as big as the Banner in another state, all at the same time.
Right.
In
That
oppor-
would not be on anybody's bingo card, but here you are.
Opportunity knocks when it knocks,
Yeah.
and the mark, I think, of a strong organization is not necessarily to plan for it, but to be ready for it when it comes. When Pittsburgh cropped up, we could have said, "Well, that's a great opportunity. Too bad it's not 2 years later when
Right.
we are in a stronger position and have learned more and have a deeper bench and, can properly do this." Well, it was available then, and the opportunity in Prince George's and Montgomery presented itself when incumbent players moved out. Um, and so, uh I think it was not a pl I think there was a long-term plan to try to make it work in Baltimore, and if we can, to, replicate it elsewhere. That's
Mhm.
about as far as it went. I don't think we intended to do it on such a compressed timetable, but as I say, when it knocks, it knocks, and, so we had kind of a flat out first half of the year, um,
Mhm.
and I, would like to think that we're gonna absorb some of this, before we do anything else crazy.
Well, let's hope, but you never know where opportunity comes from. But has there been and I guess I'm really maybe asking, like, what about your infrastructure allows you to scale so easily? You have some very talented people there, but is it because you've just recently set up all those systems that it's, like, fresh on, like, here's how we could shift them and change them? It feels very flexible, like your organization is flexible in that way, but am I like, I'm an outsider, so I don't really know that. So what's allowing you in that idea of infrastructure to be able to take on these new projects successfully?
I think you hit on the 2 things. One is leadership and the other is infrastructure. On the leadership side, we really have built a leadership team, in terms of their, experience, and capacity, that was ready to expand portfolios. We had kind of a C-suite team that to say we're gonna add another entity of the same size as the Banner, um, and we're gonna backfill with some mid-level people to make your teams stronger. That was not out of the question the way it might have been at year 2 versus at year 4. So,
Mhm,
I think that the leadership made that plausible. But the other, as you point out, is just getting everybody, and by everybody, I really mean not obviously the Banner properties elsewhere in Maryland is easy, but the Pittsburgh property over time onto a common infrastructure with the Banner. So product and technology and ad tech and marketing tech could be on one platform.
mhm,
Because when we just built and launched a new app for the Banner, started going out to 1%, 2%, 5%, the way Apple rolls it out here in late June. And we'll be able to take the work, which was 3 or 4 months of work and a not insignificant dedication of resources, and use that um, in Pittsburgh when we can get off the legacy CMS that
mhm,
Pittsburgh's been on and is really not adequate to the needs of the Post Gazette. So getting on common infrastructure, uh, and by that I really just mean tech platforms, is critical.
mhm. No, and that makes sense, and sometimes I feel like legacy publications have they have to carry their legacy along. So, you have all of the systems that have been built that are really entrenched. You have, this is how your archives have been evolving and whatnot. And it's difficult sometimes to make change in that way because it's not like you can just say, from here on out, we're starting fresh and we don't care about the last 240 years. And so
Yeah.
that does create challenges for sure. But it sounds like you're working through them.
Well, yeah, and challenges on the one hand, but it's a blessing to have
All that
that
content.
history, all that
Yeah.
content, all those photo archives, all those the coverage of everything, going back to the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Actually, no, they weren't there for of the Constitution,
Right.
1786. So they missed it by a hair. Um,
Just a smidge.
yeah, exactly. I mean, we're talking about the photo archives right now. That is tremendous. And
But
and yeah.
well, and I was at a conference, the other week about archivists who are now, I think, getting more and more intrigued by by working with news publication archives and especially as there are news media properties that are closing, and then what happens to those archives, and understanding how people are working to have those physical archives is really important. So, I- are y- the Pittsburgh Post Gazette? They're not moving offices or anything. Like, what's happening to their archives? Because that's probably like a huge physical space that takes up.
Well, so we are, even prior to the purchase, they had new office space for lease, and
Okay.
we took over that lease. Independent of the purchase, we also took over that lease, so we'll be moving into new space uh, in the early fall, and we're building it out now, and it'll be, I think, space. Um, every bit as good or frankly better, but don't tell my Baltimore team this, as what we have at the Inner Harbor here in Baltimore. And part of the culture is getting people to come in the office. We have a 3-day a week policy. Pittsburgh is in between locations right now because they knew they were set to move, and then there was a shutdown, and so they're in kind of inferior space temporarily. So the culture improves when we're able to get people in together, collaborating together in a space that just feels like conducive to doing great work.
Mhm. No, I think that's really important because actually, MBDC, of course, runs an internship program. We're really excited to have one of our interns at the Banner this summer.
Yeah,
Marika is, I hear, doing very well. But when I think about people coming into this industry, if you don't have the institutional knowledge and like you learn so much about being in a newsroom, and I think sometimes we're losing that, and journalists want to be together for the most part. They really like to learn from one another. So having a space that's really set up to do that is important for sure.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it's essential to building a culture and also to transmitting culture and just to have young people learn. I mean, all of us learned, I spent my 20s around just tremendously talented journalists in their 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, and I just learned so much from them.
Yeah. It's the grizzled old guy in the back that tells you how to do all the stuff that you really have no idea about.
Right.
Um, and so I guess in that idea of, like, paying it forward or being available for others to learn from, you have said that that's important as, maybe not part of the core mission, but you're trying to make this the revenue model that you've settled on sort of accessible and applicable in different areas. So let's, again, in that interest of clarity, tell me what the revenue model is that you guys are operating under, because I think sometimes people think, "Oh, nonprofit,
Right.
it's all philanthropy," or but then they're like, "Whoa, there's a paywall and, oh, there's these things." So tell
Yeah.
us about the revenue model.
Yeah, and I think the model is I won't say unique, but pretty unusual, because we have some decidedly, you know, 19th century planks like advertising and subscriptions. And those are important. And then we have events, which is a relatively small percent, and I'll give you the breakdown in a moment. But still kind of newfangled. Events have kind of come up in the last 10 or 20 years under the umbrella of publications that are doing that as part of their business. And then because we're a 501(c)(3), we can take philanthropic donations, and that combination of philanthropy with, say, subscriptions and advertising is unusual. There have been, as you know, hundreds and hundreds of nonprofits that have cropped up across the country, nonprofit news organizations.
Right.
Very few of them also have a subscription function. Um, and that makes us unusual. And it also is what is working for us. And we the first thing that happened when Venetoulis took over the Post Gazette is the Post Gazette became a 501(c)(3) as part of
Mhm,
Venetoulis, and now we can raise philanthropic dollars to support the Post Gazette. Uh, this year at the Banner will be almost half our revenue will be subscription revenue, and
mhm,
we now, as of today, have 85,000 paid subscribers. And then about 30% will be a combination of advertising and events, and 20%, a little more, 20 or 21, 22, is philanthropy.
mhm.
And you know that's a last year's revenue number, because we've already been reported to our board and is in being the 990 was $18 million in revenue, and we've grown in the two previous years 39% and 34% in consecutive years. If we have similar growth this year, we'll be well into the 20 millions, which is essential because we spend more than that in order to run the operation that we have. So this mix of those kind of four legs of the stool is what we think is the business model that we uh, believe can propel the Banner and Venetoulis, and therefore the Post Gazette forward.
I wanna talk about community because for me, like, the through line in what you're talking about is, a lot of times the philanthropic or those individual donations, people want it to be a part of something. and then the advertising is its own community because they're sharing information about local news, and you're not when we say advertising, yes, I'm sure you have some programmatic, like, flowing through, but a lot like, I see your people out on the street, like you are selling to individual local businesses, and then the subscriptions, again, are people who are invested in their local communities. So, tell me a little bit about, is that a through line that you see and how they all kind of and events, of course, people are coming in and
Yeah.
in community there. So, like, is that concept a container that can hold all those things, and make sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, community is a thread that runs through the whole organization. When I my shorthand that we're doing, the mission is to do trusted local news. Uh, community is just embedded in that, and everything that we do. I mean, you know, the newsroom playbook it really is audience focused. Do things that will serve audiences. Digital first, community embedded, that we are out there in the community doing our reporting, and focused on impact. So I think audience first, audience focused, digital first, embedded in the community, and dedicated to doing impact journalism. Uh, and when you're doing local and not national news, the community is if you're not focused on the community and you're not living in the community and doing and seeing the people who read your content and listen and watch it out at the market and the soccer games, then you're not doing it right and you're not
Mhm.
going to succeed.
Yeah. No, I think that that is really powerful, and so knowing, we've had such a wide expansive conversation, I don't wanna keep you forever, but I wanna know what's next. What kind of as we wind down, what closing thoughts do you have and what's next for Venetoulis and the Banner?
Well, I think what's next is to make sure that the couple of big bites we've taken in recent months, we can, God,
You gotta
to
swallow them.
continue the metaphor, digest them. That was a horrible way to start that sentence. Is that we get it right, right,
Yeah.
and we don't take our eye. It's critical in focusing first on the kind of the DC facing counties, but also in Pittsburgh that we not take our eye off the ball of our core franchise, which is, the Baltimore region.
Mhm.
That is where uh, if you add up Baltimore City and Baltimore County, that's 50% of our subscriber base.
Mhm.
Um, and it's certainly a big part of our philanthropic base. So I do believe and when I say our, I mean the banner part, not obviously the denominator gets twice as big when you add in Pittsburgh.
Right.
But if you just think about Maryland, uh, and so and we haven't, the Baltimore newsroom has not. We haven't borrowed from Baltimore to run Montgomery or Prince George's. We've supplemented the newsroom as opposed to stealing journalists from the Baltimore region to fill out space down in Prince George's and Montgomery because we're committed to making sure that we cover the Baltimore region as well or better, and
Mhm.
ideally we get better and better every day. So I think the focus now is to uh, continue to improve our execution in Prince George's and in Montgomery counties, and to integrate uh, Pittsburgh where it makes sense, and to learn the Pittsburgh market and the team, the part that remains separate, and embed ourselves in that community too, and bring what we think has worked in Maryland to Western Pennsylvania, and improve the financial situation and the journalism in Pittsburgh.
Well, I can't wait to hear more about it. You'll come back and talk to me at some point, when more of these things come to pass and as you sort of gain those lessons learned. Really appreciate your time today. It's been a great conversation, and thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. I've enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at mddcpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.